We good? Everyone good? Well, thanks for coming. I, in particular, want to thank the people who are in the room behind you, who really represent a true cross-section of Newfoundland and Labrador, represent communities, represent industries, and represent the labor movement throughout Newfoundland and Labrador, all of whom are potentially impacted by the tariffs that have been threatened by President Trump. This is a forum that we established, I think, 24 hours after the president-elect at the time, established his tweet or social post, and it's been an incredible group to provide input and information for us in how this threat of tariffs could impact workers in their industries, could impact businesses that they represent, could impact communities they represent, and consequently has allowed us to formulate a response that is informed and can meet the needs of the individuals within the industries. I have to say it's a united Team Newfoundland and Labrador approach that understands the value of a united Team Canada approach. And while we all recognize the acuity of the current fiscal situation and economic impacts that could be realized if President Trump goes ahead with these tariffs, there is a substantive and real understanding of the value of the Canadian identity, sovereignty, and the fact that that cannot be eroded to meet the acute fiscal need. But we are very hopeful that the President understands that this will be equally punishing to Americans. I think you saw yesterday in Mr. Lutnick's confirmation hearings that there was some ability to have different timelines associated with different measures. And we are hopeful that the voice, the collective voice of Newfoundland and Labrador that is represented at this table will be able to be heard between February 1st and April to ensure that the President, his sphere of influencers, understand the fiscal and economic impact that this will have on Americans. We all know what it'll have on Canadians. We want to make sure that they understand not just the economic discrepancy that exists in the proposed trade deficit, which is actually a trade surplus when you back out energy, which we are proud as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to be a part of, but also the direct impact that this will have on Americans, whether it be their grocery bills, their gas bills, or their energy bills. This will have a direct impact on families in the United States, and we don't want that to happen, just like we don't want it to happen here in Newfoundland and Labrador. So there's an incredibly diverse group of people here. Where I'm happy to answer questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer questions. I just want to thank them again for gathering with us every week, but in particular today as this February 1st deadline seems to be more real and looming to help us be better prepared and better informed for any response that needs to happen from Newfoundland and Labrador's perspective.
The news release talks about encouraging people in the province to buy local, which is always
Yeah.
a great idea. But is there, what's the strategy beyond that?
Sure. So that's one of the things we talked about last week, the previous weeks, but last week in particular. And we're hopeful to be able to present not just to the group here, but to all of Newfoundland and Labrador, a Buy in Newfoundland and Labrador, Buy in Canada campaign that will be easily applied to items that are made here in Newfoundland and Labrador, made locally. And if you think of an easy example in the grocery aisles, stickers and signs that can be put up next to products that we should all be proud of. And one of the things that was quite clear in the discussions today, that while this is an incredible moment of anxiety and disruption, we shouldn't let this moment pass. And this is stuff we should have been doing anyway. And we should be proud of our products. I'm incredibly proud of our products. We need to be making sure that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and Canadians at large understand the products and what value they can bring to them.
The premiers met yesterday. Did anyone at that meeting express any frustration with the lack of details coming out of Ottawa right now?
Of course, there's different premiers have different views, but I think there was unity in understanding the necessity of the federal government to use its full authority and power to respond, not just to the foreign threat, but to the domestic support system. And by that, I mean they need to come up with a robust plan that will support workers in the impacted industries, but also not to lose sight of the adjacent workers. And so when you consider in our our beautiful province, you know, the fishery, it's not just, we all love and care about our fishermen, but it's not just about the harvesters, although it is about them. It's about the plant workers. It's about the truckers. It's about the people who supply ice. It's about the community supports. So there was definitely unity across the country on the fact that we are calling on the federal government to use the full power that they have, that subnational governments don't necessarily have, to meet the moment for Canadians. Because make no mistake, this is an existential moment for Canadians, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and I think there was unity on that front. Was there difference of opinions about how we should be positioning ourselves publicly? Of course, and you know, there should be differences of opinions. That's the beauty of Canada, the second largest country in the world, coast to coast to coast. It'd be weird if there was complete unity about how people see their own regions, but I do think that there is an understanding that there needs to be a Team Canada approach, and you can't start with a Team Canada approach without starting with a unified Team Newfoundland and Labrador approach.
What do you want to see out of the federal government in terms of economic relief or stimulus?
Sure. So I would like to see a COVID-style relief package that is responsive to the needs of the industry, but also the industries that are adjacent, as I've already suggested. I think that they have the ability, that they have levers that provincial governments don't have. They have monetary policy. They have different fiscal room. They have different fiscal instruments, different fiscal capacity than we do here as a provincial government. So in order to meet this moment for workers and their families, they need to step up. And I believe they have stepped up in the past. You know, there is criticism about the pandemic response, but at the time, it met the moment. And I would argue it met the moment well, because we didn't trip into a depression. We didn't trip into the equivalent of a Great Depression. Did it cause inflationary pressures? Yes. But isn't it easier to deal with the inflationary pressures than mass layoffs and people in the streets with no jobs, no homes? This is the moment that the federal government, I think, understands and I think is willing to meet.
Can you tell us about any non-tariff measures that were discussed at that meeting yesterday?
Certainly. I mean, there is the understanding, or certainly there is the contemplation that there are other measures that the president is seeking. There are other actions that the president is requiring. I would suggest to all of Newfoundland and Labrador and all of Canada, these are things that we should be doing for Canadians. Set aside the president's agenda. You know, we want to work with the president in a diplomatic way, but we don't work for the president. We work for Canadians. And establishing a good, safe border is good for Canadians. Establishing our commitment to NATO is good for Canadians. Establishing Five-Wing Goose Bay as a NATO base that can meet the current political unrest and demands across the country and the world, that is good for Canadians. So those are the types of feelings that we're having here and want to meet the moment.
How many jobs will be impacted in this province if all this comes to light this weekend?
Sure. I mean, our estimate is anywhere between 10 and 20,000 jobs, which, if you look at some of the numbers that other premiers have said to scale, that would be equivalent. Certainly, you know, there are some frightening numbers, and I don't want to create anxiety in any different industry, but, you know, it could be incredibly punitive to the fishing industry, which we will be there to support. Come hell or high water, we will be there to support harvesters, plant workers, and anyone attached to that industry. It is critical for the economy. It's critical to the people of the province. It's critical to our culture. And we can't take another assault on our fishing industry, and we'll be there to support them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little more specific about the fishing
Yep.
industry, like how exactly it would, if it is imposed, would affect it.
Well, I mean, there's, you know, this is the problem in dealing with hypotheticals, and it's part of the problem in trying to come up with a detailed, responsive plan, because the only thing that's certain about the president is the uncertainty in itself. But if you look at the tariffs as they've been proposed, I mean, at the extreme, it could be 1 in 2 jobs impacted in the fishing industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. That would be crippling. That'd be crippling to communities. It'd be crippling to our economy. It'd be crippling to our identity. So, number one, we don't want to see that happen. But number two, if it does happen, we will be there to support communities, workers, and families that are touched by that industry.
Are you worried that if these tariffs are imposed and that line is crossed, that there's no turning back once that line is crossed?
No, I'm not at all, actually. If you look at the President of the United States, you know, he's shown an ability to to be perfectly okay with whiplash. He says one thing one day and something else is acceptable the next. So again, the only thing certain about the president is uncertainty, and I think that as Canadians, we need to recognize that we have a strong position when it comes to our natural resource. We have a strong position when it comes to workers throughout the country, and we can't be afraid to exercise that. No one wants to. We're all Canadians. We want to be diplomatic in our approach in resolving these issues, but we can't be afraid to show our strength, and I think it would be absolutely wrong to meet the moment, the fiscal acute moment, by bending the knee. I did completely fundamentally disagree. This could be perceived as a strong attack on our sovereignty and independence and our national identity. And while we all need to meet the fiscal moment and the economic moment, we need to also, as leaders across the country, be thinking about what Canada looks like now, but in 10 and 20 years from now. Because this will be the moment where people look back and say, well, when did Canada change? Did we stand up? Did we meet the moment? Did we have the courage for future generations to protect the maple leaf? And I believe everybody here in this room today shares the view that we have a strong position going in, but we'll be responsive and responsible in any response that's provoked.
You mentioned that you'll be there for people who work in the fishery. Can you speak more specifically to what measures you're considering in terms of how you will be there for them?
Sure. I mean, you know, one of the obvious measures would be enhanced EI supports, which I'm glad to hear yesterday the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc talked to. But again, my message to the Prime Minister and the Minister yesterday, and the Minister of Fisheries who happened to be here yesterday, was harvesters are incredibly important. We all love and support them, but it has to be about plant workers and adjacent industries as well. And truckers, you know, and one of the solutions, by the way, that came from this table about how we can help combat any of the fiscal realities of this tariff would be for the federal government to help alleviate some of the pressures on Marine Atlantic. You know, we all love and respect and absolutely cherish the fact that there is an island portion of this province that the majority of the people live on and work and produce things from. But that means it has to be transported off largely using Marine Atlantic. What better time for the federal government to look at that constitutionally guaranteed right and reduce the fees so that products can get to market a little easier, a little cheaper, and help mitigate and mute any tariffs that could be in place.
The news release mentions expanding and accelerating trade with other partners. Which partners are you thinking of?
Well, I think, you know, we need to look at diversifying our export markets. Some are fairly diversified, believe it or not. You know, oil and gas is, you know, almost 50-50 U.S., 60-40 maybe between the U.S. and the rest of the world. But there are other industries like aquaculture exports are almost 100%. Snow crab is almost 90% exported to the United States. So it's a big, beautiful world out there who are starved for our products. These commodities are desired around the world, whether it's crab, oil and gas, lumber. We can't lose this moment now to look at how we diversify that portfolio. You know, in some way, the president has done us a favor in helping us look internally to say, should we be relying on one single partner? These are incredible products that can be sold anywhere in the world, the Middle East, Asia, anywhere in the world. And we need to make sure that we are doing our best to market them elsewhere, and we will.
Premier, you mentioned about 3 weeks ago that these Trump tariff threats are a question of sovereignty, a sovereign attack on Canada. But we've seen that it has changed for domestic Canadian policy. We've spent $1.3 billion beefing up our security along our borders. So in light of that change of the policy in the face of tariff threats, you know, what do you feel about our Canadian sovereignty?
Well, I believe we should be doing the border protection for Canadians. I can guarantee you there's more drugs coming into Newfoundland and Labrador from the United States than there are from Newfoundland and Labrador to the United States. So that's a fallacy. And I think that we've all succumbed to this narrative that, which is false, that Canada is importing into the United States illegally, you know, drugs and immigrants. That is not true. That is a bilateral issue. It's not a unilateral issue. It's a bilateral issue. We should be establishing borders for Canadians, for the protection of families across Canada, for the protection of our maple leaf and our sovereignty. And sure, did it meet a demand? Perhaps. But we should be doing this anyway for us. Anytime anyone, anywhere can take fentanyl off the street, we should be doing that. If we're doing that at borders, if we're doing it on the streets of our communities, we should be doing that. So the enhanced border security is a great measure. I don't believe it threatens our sovereignty. In fact, I believe that it enhances our sovereignty. I do think, and that was my comment a couple of weeks ago, I don't take as a joke, as a moment of humor, for 1 second, the comments that we are the 51st state. We are a proud, strong, sovereign nation, and to have those threats made, I take as an insult and as an assault to those who gave their lives to fight for the sovereignty and independence of this country. And that's not something that we can lose sight of in trying to solve this acute equation.
Can we talk about the energy sector in a bit more detail in terms of like how that will be affected?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the benefits, I suppose, if you will, of being an island and having our incredible offshore product is it's not landlocked. There is the ability to diversify. There is also some regulatory hurdles that we know that the federal government could deal with quickly, and I believe Minister Anand is wise to this and is actioning this. In order for us, for example, to allow our ships with proud Newfoundland and Labrador crude to go into New Brunswick. That is a regulatory hurdle that has existed in the past that can be eliminated, that will allow, by the way, not only for us diversifying our export products to refineries, arguably it'd still be an import then, but it will also allow for protection of the East Coast. So if there is any disruption of the pipelines, which by the way go in and across the borders multiple different times, there will be a security of supply here on the East Coast by proud Newfoundland and Labrador oil and by a proud New Brunswick refinery. Now that is a strong Team Canada approach.
Part of the press release that we got earlier was about, encouraging people to buy local when we can, make that the Team Newfoundland part of Team Canada approach. I should say Team Newfoundland and Labrador.
And Canada.
In Canada. But, we're kind of in a cost of living crisis. Every time you go to the grocery store, all things look a little more expensive. So is there any stimulus checks or any kind of funding coming to people's pockets to help them weather this?
Well, look, we'll address the issues as they arise. Make no mistake, there will be the acute impact immediately on industries like the fishery, like the forestry industry. Those impacts will be immediate. The subsequent ripple effect of these impacts on consumers will be felt over weeks and months. And I'm confident that with the commitment of the federal government and them exercising their full authority and powers that they have, in combination with the provinces, that we can meet those moments and those challenges as they arise.
When will you know if this is going to happen or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that's a question best addressed to Mr. Lutnick, but hopefully, given Minister LeBlanc's response and the federal government's responses at the border, which is good for Canadians once again, that February 1st date will come and go.
I just want to follow up on something you mentioned off the start about a campaign to support local, similar to Elizabeth's question. You talked about stickers and signs in grocery stores. Is that something that we're going to do, and who's going to head that up?
Yeah, we're hopeful to have, based on the feedback from this incredible table today and in the previous weeks, hopeful to have a marketing campaign ready to go within the next days.
And it will be the provincial government?
Well, the provincial government in consultation with all of these incredible folks that are gathered here today. I mean, I encourage you all to interview them as well. There's a cross-section of people who generally are not at the same table with the United Front, but we're here to meet the moment for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And I think that, if I can speak to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians for a second, this is how leaders across your province are taking this incredibly serious to meet the challenges and the moment for you.
So the provincial government will be paying for the campaign?
Absolutely, 100%. And I don't make any apologies for that. In fact, the criticism should be we should have been doing this 2 years ago, and you know what? You'd be right.
Do you guys need anybody else this year?
No, you did a good job.
Firstly, we're very thankful for the Premier creating this forum. I think it's very important that we're all at the table. It just shows how important this issue is to our provincial government. And to hear the Premier always put the fishery and the impacts first and foremost in discussions, I mean, it means a lot to us, it means a lot to our members. Given the timelines that we're facing right now, we're in a critical moment of collective bargaining on snow crab. We're coming off a few very tumultuous years, and we need stability in our industry. So, you know, to see that that's first and foremost and being addressed is super, super important. We met with the federal fisheries minister yesterday as well, and it was good to see that the federal government is taking all of our concerns very seriously. But again, we stress the importance of the federal government stepping in right now with supports to help our workers as harvesters, that's plant workers. Of course, we represent 14 to 15,000 workers in rural Newfoundland and Labrador, and I think that's important as well. The fishing industry is the driver of rural Newfoundland and Labrador. These are very good seasonal jobs that keep our rural communities going, and we're going to need help. As the Premier said, over 90% of our snow crab last year went into the United States. So that's not a volume that can be absorbed locally, and diversifying markets is not going to happen overnight. So we're really concerned what it's going to mean for consumer buying power in the United States. Snow crab is such a niche product, and you know, consumers will try to find cheaper alternatives, and that's definitely not what we want to see, especially when we've come off a couple of really difficult years and we're finally seeing the marketplace start to rebound.
What are your members saying?
They're very concerned, especially for what it's meaning right now for collective bargaining. This is kind of the boogeyman hanging over all of our heads at the moment. And, you know, ourselves and the Association of Seafood Producers, I know, share a lot of the same fears of what this is going to mean. And it's not just snow crab. We have a lobster industry in this province that is starting to absolutely boom. And the United States is a very important market for lobster, for cod, you know, all of our seafood products. So it's definitely concerning, and we're very happy with the Premier and the provincial government's response here, bringing us all to the table and taking all of our concerns, our suggestions very, very seriously.
What will this weekend, you know, look like for you? I heard earlier the Premier kind of told everyone in the room to keep their cell phones on. What will it look like for you this weekend?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody at the table today, we're going to be pretty anxious on Saturday to see what happens. But I made the point earlier that it's not just Saturday. You know, maybe it's April. And in the long term, we have 4 years now that we just don't know what's going to be thrown at us. So I think maintaining forums like this is going to be very important. Collaboration, open communication between industries, with both levels of government. You know, it's something I feel we should be doing more of anyway, but especially important in circumstances like this.
You mentioned that it's been a tumultuous couple of years. Can the fishery sustain such a big hit after the last couple of years and everything you've gone through?
That's another wait and see question, I think. You know, we were really looking forward to a rebound year when it comes to prices to harvesters. We're seeing a rebound in the market, and, you know, there's new leadership in the industry. So far, we have a very, very good working relationship, and we were looking forward to getting to the collective bargaining table and having some stability, some really good discussions, and finally getting to a place where, you know, we're not protesting, where the season can start on time. And yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us saw this being dropped on us, but again, like every year in the fishery, we'll work through it, and we'll work with both levels of government to do that.
If tariffs are imposed, what specific measures have you sort of outlined that would be beneficial to your members?
Well, again, as Premier mentioned, you know, we're going to look for some supports. We need a robust EI system that's going to help workers, because again, these are seasonal jobs. And it's not only the plant workers and the harvesters. Again, in rural communities, it's the grocery store owner, it's the truck driver, it's the bait depot. You know, it's just a number of workers that are going to be affected, and it's a trickle-down effect. So we're going to be looking for a very, very strong response from the federal government to reach out to those workers and to support them, because, you know, the fishing industry is definitely going to need it. Okay.
Charlene?
Afternoon.
to, just initially, just generally, how you feel, your industry could be impacted if these tariffs go in place this weekend?
First of all, I want to thank Premier Furey and the ministers for bringing this forum together. I know he's part of Team Canada, but I'm very pleased to be here as part of Team NL. The oil industry, I'm here to represent the service and supply companies that are involved in the oil industry, but as you know, the oil industry is the most significant contributor to GDP in the province. And with that, there comes an enormous multiplier effect. So when our industry is doing well, construction is doing well, retail sales is, doing well. So it is a significant contributor, and that's why it's so important that we're all here around this table together, helping each other, and that's one of the things that have come out of this. As the Premier mentioned, the offshore oil product is unique in that it can go to anywhere in the world. We're not reliant on one customer, so that is an advantage. However, if we have to wait and see, but if the prices of oil starts to drop, that could have an impact in terms of production numbers, which would then ultimately impact our members. So some of the things that we talked about here today is the Atlantic Investment Tax Credit, looking at that, looking at the weighting and the matrix for procurement, for government procurement in particularly. Is there an opportunity to increase that weighting for Newfoundland and Labrador companies? And of course, if the impact comes down to our individual workers and their families, we would look to the government for support. But the one thing that has really come to light with all of this is the importance of energy security and how we should be producing more oil in Newfoundland and Labrador and supplying our lower carbon product to the world. And with such uncertainty in the economy right now is not the time to be bringing in things like the emissions cap. That's only going to drive away investment, and we need the absolute opposite of that right now. Said it all in one sentence. Thank you very much.
Is that correct? For now, at least, yeah?
Great.
Oh, should have asked that.
Well, just reach out if there's something to cover. I know we're getting late in the day, but, yeah.
Well done.
Okay, great. Do you want to, we'll